Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into one of the darkest chapters in London's history. We're traveling back to 1665, to the narrow, filthy streets where death walks openly and the air itself seems poisoned. This is the story of one day in your life as a plague doctor during the Great Plague of London, when the city became a kingdom of the dying and you were one of the few willing to walk among them. If you enjoy this kind of thing, maybe give it a like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love hearing from you all across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and settle in. Let's drift back in time. You wake to the sound of church bells tolling in the distance. Not the celebratory peals that once marked weddings and festivals, but the slow, methodical death knells that have become the soundtrack of London in this plague year. The bells ring constantly now, so many that the parishes have had to coordinate their tolling to avoid a cacophony of mourning that would drive the living mad. Your small room above the apothecary shop is still dark, but you can see the faint gray light of dawn creeping through the single window. The air is thick and heavy, carrying scents that have become all too familiar. The smoke from the fires that burn constantly to purify the air, the sweet sick smell of death that seems to permeate every building, and underneath it all, the acrid stench of fierce sweat and unwashed bodies. You lie still for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city awakening. But it's not the London you once knew. The usual morning chorus of merchants calling their wares, children playing in the streets, and cartwheels rumbling over cobblestones has been replaced by something far more sinister. You hear the slow creak of death carts making their rounds, the muffled sobs of the newly bereaved, and occasionally, the wild screaming of someone who has just discovered the telltale swellings that mark the plague's arrival. Your body aches in ways that have nothing to do with sleep. The weight of your protective clothing, worn for 12 to 14 hours each day, has carved permanent soreness into your shoulders and back. The leather mask you wear presses against your face for so long that it has left permanent indentations around your eyes and jaw. Even now, hours after removing it, you can feel the ghostly pressure of the beak-like protrusion that holds the herbs and aromatics meant to protect you from the poisoned air. You sit up slowly, feeling the protest in joints that have grown stiff from the constant tension of moving through a city where death lurks around every corner. Your hands rest on your knees, and you notice that they're trembling slightly. Not from cold, though the morning air carries an unseasonable chill for summer, but from the accumulated stress of months spent in daily contact with humanity's greatest enemy. The trembling is new, started perhaps a week ago. You've noticed it most when you're trying to perform delicate tasks, like mixing medicines or examining patients. Your hands, once steady as a surgeon's, now shake with the fine tremor of someone whose nerves have been stretched beyond their normal limits. You stand and move to the window, looking out over the streets of London. What you see would have been unimaginable just a year ago. The normally bustling thoroughfares are nearly empty except for the occasional death cart, its driver calling out in a voice made hoarse by constant use, "Bring out your dead. Bring out your dead." Many of the houses you can see bear the mark of the plague. A large red cross painted on the door, with the words "Lord have mercy on us" written beneath. These are the houses of the infected, sealed by order of the city authorities with the healthy trapped inside alongside the sick. You can sometimes see faces at the windows of these marked houses, pale and desperate, watching the world go by while they wait to see whether they will live or die. Your own house, mercifully, bears no such mark. As a plague doctor, you've been granted certain protections and privileges, including the right to move freely through the city and to maintain your own residence. But you know that these privileges come with a price that grows heavier each day. You dress slowly, methodically, in the clothes you wear beneath your protective equipment. The linen shirt is clean, boiled in water and lye to kill any corruption that might cling to it. The wool breeches are heavy and hot, but they provide a barrier between your skin and the leather overgarments that you'll don before venturing into the streets. Your breakfast is simple. Bread that's slightly stale but still edible, and small ale that's safer to drink than the water from the city's wells. The bread tastes of nothing much, but you eat it anyway, knowing that you'll need whatever strength it can provide for the day ahead. The ale is warm and bitter, but it helps to settle your stomach, which has been nervous and queasy more often than not in recent weeks. As you eat, you review the list of patients you must visit today. The list is written in your own hand on a piece of paper that you keep folded in your pocket. The names mean nothing to you personally, but each represents a household touched by the plague, a family facing the possibility of extinction. The first name on the list is Thomas Whitmore, a baker in Cheapside whose wife was reported to have developed the swellings 3 days ago. By now, she's either dead or recovering, and you'll need to examine the rest of the family to determine if the contagion has spread. The second is the household of Marcus Devlin, a merchant near the docks whose entire family has been sealed inside their house for nearly a week. The watchman posted outside their door has reported sounds of distress from within, but no one has emerged to bring out the dead. The third is Sarah Blackwood, a widow in Whitechapel who has been caring for her sick grandchildren. She sent word yesterday that one of the children has died, but she fears to move the body lest she spread the contagion to her neighbors. Each name represents hours of work in conditions that would have been unthinkable to you before this plague year. You'll enter houses where the air is thick with disease, examine bodies that are swollen and blackened with corruption, and make decisions about treatment and quarantine that could mean the difference between life and death for entire families. You finish your breakfast and begin the process of preparing for the day. First comes the leather overcoat, thick and heavy, treated with oils and waxes to repel the corrupted air. The coat reaches nearly to your ankles and is fitted with deep pockets for carrying your medical instruments and supplies. Next come the leather breeches, worn over your regular clothes to provide additional protection. They're stiff and uncomfortable, making movement awkward and deliberate, but they've been blessed by the church and treated with herbs that are supposed to ward off the plague's influence. The gloves are perhaps the most important part of your protective equipment. They reach nearly to your elbows and are made of the thickest leather available. The fingertips are reinforced with additional layers, as your hands will be in constant contact with infected surfaces and diseased bodies. Finally comes the mask, the distinctive beak-like creation that marks you as a plague doctor to everyone who sees you. The mask is made of leather and fitted with glass lenses that allow you to see while protecting your eyes from the corrupted air. The long beak is stuffed with herbs, spices, and aromatics, rosemary, thyme, lavender, and mint, along with more exotic substances like theriac and ground unicorn horn. The mask is the most uncomfortable part of your equipment. It's heavy and hot, and the breathing holes are small enough that you constantly feel short of breath. The lenses fog up regularly, especially in the heat of summer, and you have to stop frequently to wipe them clean. But more than the physical discomfort, the mask creates a psychological barrier between you and the world. When you wear it, you become something other than human, a creature of medicine and death that inspires fear in the healthy and desperation in the sick. Children flee when they see you coming, and adults cross themselves and mutter prayers under their breath. You pick up your leather bag, heavy with the tools of your trade. Lancets for bleeding patients, cupping glasses for drawing out corrupted humors, bottles of various medicines and tinctures, and a small brazier for burning aromatics to purify the air around you. There's also a long wooden staff, used for examining patients without touching them directly, and for pushing aside clothing or bedding that might be contaminated. The staff is carved with symbols of protection and has been blessed by multiple priests, though you're not sure how much good their blessings do in the face of a plague that seems to strike the righteous and the sinful with equal ferocity. You step out into the street, and immediately the smell hits you even through the aromatics in your mask. London in the plague year smells like death and corruption, but also like the desperate attempts to mask those scents. Fires burn on every corner, fueled by whatever materials people can find: wood, cloth, even furniture from the houses of the dead. The smoke from these fires is supposed to purify the air, but it creates a constant haze that makes breathing difficult and visibility poor. Your eyes water constantly, and you develop a persistent cough that you hope is from the smoke rather than from the plague itself. The streets are eerily quiet except for the essential sounds of a city trying to survive. You hear the death carts making their rounds, the watchmen calling out the hours, and occasionally the sound of weeping from behind shuttered windows. But the normal sounds of commerce and daily life have largely disappeared. Your first destination is in Cheapside, normally one of London's busiest commercial districts. But now many of the shops are shuttered, their owners either dead, fled, or too afraid to open for business. The few that remain open display signs promising that their goods have been purified by fire or blessed by clergy, though you doubt these measures provide much real protection. You walk carefully through the narrow streets, your staff tapping against the cobblestones with each step. The leather soles of your boots make little noise, but the sound of your breathing through the mask is audible to anyone nearby. It's a harsh, labored sound that adds to the impression of something inhuman stalking through the city. The house you're looking for bears the red cross and the inscription "Lord, have mercy on us." A watchman sits on a stool outside the door, paid by the city to ensure that no one enters or leaves without permission. He looks up as you approach, and you can see relief in his eyes. The arrival of a plague doctor means that someone with authority is taking charge of the situation. You show him your credentials, a letter signed by the city authorities that grants you access to any house in London. He nods and unlocks the door, standing well back as you enter. The smell that greets you is overwhelming even through your mask. The sweet sick stench of corruption mixed with the acrid smell of fear, sweat, and human waste. The interior of the house is dark, the windows shuttered and the air thick with smoke from candles and oil lamps. You can hear voices from the upper floor, speaking in the hushed tones that people use when death is near. Your footsteps on the wooden stairs sound unnaturally loud in the silence. You find the family gathered in the main bedroom. Thomas Whitmore, the baker, sits beside the bed where his wife lies motionless. Two children, a boy and a girl perhaps 8 and 10 years old, huddle together in the corner. Their faces are pale and frightened, and they stare at you with the wide eyes of children who have seen too much. The woman on the bed is clearly dead, her body already showing the signs of corruption that follow death in the summer heat. The telltale swellings, called buboes, are visible on her neck and under her arms, blackened and burst. Her face is contorted in what must have been agony, and her skin has taken on the dark, mottled appearance that gives the plague its name, the Black Death. You examine the body carefully, using your staff to lift the bedding and check for additional signs of the disease. The progression is typical. The swellings appeared first, followed by fever and delirium, then death within 3 to 5 days. There's nothing unusual about this case, which is somehow more horrifying than if there had been something unique about it. You turn your attention to the living members of the family. The husband shows no obvious signs of infection, but that means little. The plague can incubate for days before the first symptoms appear, and some people seem to carry the disease without becoming ill themselves, passing it to others who die within hours. You examine him carefully, checking his neck, armpits, and groin for the swellings that mark the plague's presence. His skin is clammy with fierce sweat, but it's not the burning fever that accompanies the disease. His breathing is rapid and shallow, but again, this could be fear rather than illness. The children are more difficult to examine. They're terrified of your appearance and shrink away when you try to approach them. You have to speak to them in the gentlest voice you can manage through the mask, explaining that you're there to help them, that you need to make sure they're healthy. Eventually, you're able to examine them both. The boy shows no signs of infection, but the girl has a small swelling on her neck that could be the beginning of a bubo. It's hard to tell. It could also be a normal swollen gland from some minor illness. But in the current climate, any swelling is cause for concern. You make your diagnosis and recommendations. The dead woman must be removed immediately and buried in one of the plague pits outside the city. The house must remain sealed for 40 days to ensure that any lingering contagion has time to die out. The family must be watched carefully for signs of disease. You prepare a mixture of herbs and medicines for the girl, something that might help if she's in the early stages of the plague. It's probably useless, but it gives the family something to hope for, something to do besides wait and see if death will claim them all. The husband begs you to tell him that his family will survive, that the plague has taken his wife but will spare his children. You want to offer him comfort, but you've learned that false hope is crueler than honest uncertainty. You tell him that you'll return in 3 days to check on them, and that he should send word immediately if anyone develops fever or additional swellings. You leave the house feeling the weight of another family's tragedy. This is the hardest part of your work, not the physical danger or the discomfort of the protective equipment, but the emotional toll of witnessing so much suffering without being able to do much to help. Your next destination is near the docks, where the merchant Marcus Devlin lives with his family. The area near the Thames is even more affected by the plague than the city center, possibly because of the rats that come off the ships or the poor sanitation near the water. The streets here are narrower and more crowded with the poor, who cannot afford to flee the city as the wealthy have done. Many of the houses show signs of plague: red crosses on doors, boarded-up windows, the occasional sound of weeping or prayer from within. You find the Devlin house easily enough. It's larger than most in the area, reflecting the family's merchant status, but it bears the same red cross and inscription as the houses of the poor. The watchman here looks nervous and tired, as if he's been on duty for longer than his usual shift. He explains that the family has been sealed inside for 6 days now, and there's been no word from within for the past 2 days. He's heard sounds of movement and occasional voices, but no one has come to the door to report deaths or ask for help. You enter the house and immediately know that something is wrong. The smell is different from the previous house, not just death and corruption but something else, something that makes your stomach turn even through the aromatics in your mask. It's the smell of bodies that have been dead for days in the summer heat, combined with the waste and filth that accumulates when people are too sick to maintain basic hygiene. The ground floor is empty except for overturned furniture and scattered belongings. It looks as if the family tried to barricade themselves into the upper floors when the plague struck. You climb the stairs carefully, your staff ready in case you encounter something unexpected. The upper floor is a scene of devastation. Bodies lie scattered throughout the rooms, some on beds, others on the floor where they fell. The family clearly tried to care for each other as the disease progressed, but they were overwhelmed by its rapid spread and deadly progression. You count 5 bodies, 2 adults and 3 children. The progression of the disease is clear from the state of the bodies. The first to die, probably the mother, lies in the main bedroom with the classic signs of plague death. The others show various stages of the disease, from early swellings to full corruption. But there's something else in the house, something that makes your skin crawl beneath your protective clothing. You can hear movement from one of the rooms, a scratching, scrabbling sound that doesn't sound human. You approach carefully, your staff extended, and peer into the room. What you see makes you step back involuntarily. The room contains the body of a child, but it's covered with rats. Dozens of them, feeding on the corruption, their eyes glittering in the dim light. They scatter when they see you, but they don't go far. They've been feeding here for days, growing fat on the dead. This is one of the most horrible aspects of the plague, the way it breaks down the normal barriers between human and animal, between the living and the dead. The rats that carry the disease also feed on its victims, creating a cycle of infection that seems designed to spread death as widely as possible. You retreat from the house quickly, making notes about the number of dead and the condition of the bodies. The house will need to be cleared by the dead cart men, and everything inside will have to be burned. The building itself might need to be destroyed to prevent the spread of infection. Outside, you inform the watchman of what you found. He nods grimly, unsurprised. He's seen similar scenes before, entire families wiped out by the plague with no one left to report their deaths. It's one of the reasons the disease spreads so rapidly. The dead cannot bury their own dead. Your final appointment of the morning is in Whitechapel, a poor area where the plague has hit particularly hard. The narrow streets and crowded living conditions make it easy for the disease to spread from house to house, and many of the residents lack the resources to flee or to obtain proper medical care. The house you're looking for is smaller and shabbier than the others you've visited today. Sarah Blackwood, the widow who lives there, has been caring for her orphaned grandchildren since their parents died of the plague several weeks ago. She sent word that one of the children has died, but she's afraid to move the body. You find her waiting for you at the door, a thin, gray-haired woman in her 50s who looks as if she's aged 10 years in the past few months. Her clothes are clean but worn, and her face bears the drawn, exhausted look of someone who has been caring for the sick without adequate rest or food. She leads you upstairs to a small room where 2 children lie on a single bed. One, a boy of perhaps 6, is clearly dead, his small body already showing the signs of corruption. The other, a girl slightly older, is still alive but obviously very ill. She breathes in short, labored gasps, and her skin burns with fever. The woman explains that the boy died during the night, and she's been sitting with him and his sister ever since, not knowing what to do. She's afraid to move his body lest she spread the contagion to herself or to the surviving child. She's also afraid to leave the girl alone, even for the few minutes it would take to summon help. You examine both children carefully. The boy shows the typical progression of plague death: swollen buboes, darkened skin, and the peaceful expression that often comes to plague victims in their final moments. The girl is in the early stages of the disease, with small swellings beginning to appear and a high fever that makes her delirious. You prepare medicine for the girl, though you know it's probably futile. The plague kills 9 out of 10 people it infects, and children are particularly vulnerable. But you give the grandmother detailed instructions on how to administer the medicine and how to care for the girl's fever. You also arrange for the boy's body to be removed. The grandmother weeps as you explain what needs to be done, but she understands that leaving the body in the house would only increase the danger to the surviving child. Death has become so common in London that even the most tender-hearted have learned to be practical about it. As you prepare to leave, the grandmother grasps your arm through your leather sleeve. She begs you to tell her that her granddaughter will survive, that she won't lose the last member of her family to this terrible disease. You see the desperation in her eyes, the need for some hope to cling to in the face of overwhelming loss. But you've learned that false hope is often cruder than honesty. You tell her that you'll return in 2 days to check on the girl, and that she should continue with the medicine and the cooling treatments you've prescribed. You don't promise that the girl will live, but you don't tell her that death is inevitable either. You leave the house feeling the familiar weight of helplessness that accompanies so much of your work. You're called a doctor, but so often you function more as a chronicler of death, recording the plague's progress through the city one family at a time. The walk back to your lodgings takes you through streets that have become all too familiar over the past months. You pass houses marked with red crosses, death carts making their rounds, and the occasional funeral procession, though these have become much smaller and more hurried than they once were. You also pass the constant fires that burn throughout the city. The authorities have ordered that fires be maintained on every street corner to purify the air, and the citizens have added their own fires, burning everything from furniture to books in the hope that the smoke will drive away the pestilence. The smoke creates a permanent haze over London, a gray-brown cloud that hangs low over the city and makes breathing difficult even for those who aren't wearing masks. Your eyes water constantly, and you've developed a persistent cough that you hope is from the smoke rather than from the disease itself. You return to your lodgings as the sun reaches its zenith, bringing with it the oppressive heat that makes the summer plague season so much worse than the winter months. The combination of heat, smoke, and the stench of corruption creates an atmosphere that feels almost physically oppressive. You climb the stairs to your room slowly, your body tired from the morning's work and the weight of your protective equipment. The leather clothing is soaked with sweat, and the mask has left deep marks on your face where it's pressed against your skin for hours. You remove the protective equipment piece by piece, hanging each item carefully to air out before it's needed again. The leather must be cleaned and treated regularly to maintain its protective properties, and you've learned to be meticulous about this maintenance. Your regular clothes underneath are soaked with sweat and stained with the salt marks that come from prolonged exertion in heavy clothing. You change into fresh garments and wash your hands and face with water and strong soap, scrubbing until your skin is raw. Your midday meal is simple: bread, cheese, and ale, eaten in solitude while you review your notes from the morning's visits. You record the details of each case, noting symptoms, treatments prescribed, and outcomes observed. These records might eventually help other doctors understand the disease better, though for now they serve mainly as a chronicle of London's suffering. The bread tastes of ash from the fires that burn throughout the city. Everything tastes of ash now, as if the smoke has penetrated every grain and leaf in London. The cheese is starting to turn in the heat, but it's still edible, and you need the strength it provides. As you eat, you can hear the sounds of the city continuing its struggle with the plague. Church bells tolling for the dead, death carts rumbling over cobblestones, and occasionally the sound of someone screaming in grief or pain. These sounds have become so constant that you barely notice them anymore, like the sound of rain or wind. You review your list of afternoon appointments. 3 more houses to visit, 3 more families facing the possibility of extinction. The work is emotionally exhausting as well as physically demanding, but it's also necessary. You're one of the few people in London with the training and the courage to enter infected houses and provide what help you can. The first afternoon appointment is with a family in Southwark, across the Thames from the main part of the city. Southwark has always been a rough area, home to theatres, brothels, and bear baiting rings, but now it's also one of the areas hardest hit by the plague. You put on your protective equipment again, going through the careful process of ensuring that every piece fits properly and that no skin is exposed. The leather is still warm from the morning's wear, and it feels clammy and uncomfortable against your skin. The mask is the worst part. It's heavy and hot, and the breathing holes are small enough that you feel constantly short of breath. The herbs and aromatics in the beak have a strong, almost overwhelming scent that makes your eyes water and your nose burn. But the mask also provides a psychological barrier between you and the horrors you encounter. When you wear it, you become something other than human, a creature of medicine and death that can move through the plague-stricken city with a kind of professional detachment. You cross London Bridge to reach Southwark, passing through the crowds of people fleeing the city. The bridge is one of the few ways out of London, and it's constantly crowded with carts and wagons loaded with belongings, their owners hoping to escape the plague by reaching the countryside. But many of these refugees are already infected, carrying the disease with them to communities that have so far been spared. You can see the telltale signs in some of the travelers. The flushed faces of fever, the careful way they move to avoid putting pressure on swollen glands, the look of desperate hope mixed with growing despair. The house in Southwark is typical of the area, timber-framed and leaning, with small windows and a thatched roof. It bears the Red Cross and inscription that mark it as a plague house, and a tired-looking watchman sits outside, playing dice with himself to pass the time. Inside, you find a situation that's become depressingly familiar. A family of 4, with the parents dead and 2 children, aged perhaps 12 and 14, trying to care for themselves. They've been sealed in the house for over a week, surviving on what food they had stored and on water from a well in the small yard behind the house. The children are both showing early signs of the plague, slight fever, swollen glands, and the listless, vacant look that often precedes the more serious symptoms. They're also clearly terrified, not just of the disease but of being alone in the world with no one to care for them. You examine them both carefully, noting the progression of their symptoms and trying to determine how much time they might have left. The plague typically kills within a week of the first symptoms, but occasionally people survive, and children sometimes have a better chance than adults. You prepare medicines for both children and give them detailed instructions on how to care for themselves and each other. You also arrange for food to be delivered to the house, knowing that proper nutrition might give them a slightly better chance of survival. But as you work, you're aware of the fundamental helplessness of your position. You're called a doctor, but you have no real cure for the plague, no treatment that reliably saves lives. Most of what you do is comfort care, easing the passage from life to death rather than preventing the journey entirely. The children beg you to stay with them, to not leave them alone in the house with their dead parents. But you have other patients to see, other families who need whatever help you can provide. You promise to return in 2 days, knowing that there's a good chance you'll find both children dead when you do. Your next appointment is in Bishopsgate, where a merchant family has been struck by the plague. The father sent word that his wife and eldest son are showing symptoms, and he's desperate for help. The family has money, which means they can afford better care, but money provides little protection against the plague. The house is larger and better maintained than many you visit, with glass windows and a slate roof. But it bears the same red cross and inscription as the hovels of the poor. The plague is one of the few things in London that doesn't respect social boundaries. Inside, you find a scene of desperate activity. The merchant, a well-dressed man in his 40s, is trying to care for his sick family members while also attempting to maintain some semblance of normal life. Servants have fled, leaving the family to manage on their own. His wife lies in the main bedroom, burning with fever and covered in the characteristic rash that sometimes accompanies the plague. She's delirious, talking to people who aren't there and occasionally crying out in pain. The swellings on her neck and under her arms are large and dark, indicating that the disease is well advanced. The son, a young man of perhaps 20, is in the early stages of the disease. He's conscious and aware of what's happening to him, which in some ways makes his situation more tragic than his mother's. He knows he's likely to die, and he's terrified of the pain and degradation that lie ahead. You examine both patients carefully, noting the progression of their symptoms and the likelihood of recovery. The mother is almost certainly going to die within the next day or two. The son might have a chance if the disease doesn't progress too rapidly, but his chances are not good. You prepare the strongest medicines you have, compounds that are supposed to draw out the corrupt humors and restore the balance of the body. You also prescribe bleeding, hoping to relieve some of the pressure that the disease creates in the body's vessels. The merchant begs you to save his family, offering to pay whatever price you name. But money can't buy what doesn't exist, and there's no reliable cure for the plague. You do what you can to ease their suffering and to give them the best possible chance of survival, but you can't promise more than that. You spend longer in this house than you usually do, partly because the family can afford extended care and partly because the merchant's desperation is so evident. He's a man who's used to solving problems with money and influence, and he can't accept that there are some problems that can't be solved. When you finally leave, you carry with you the weight of another family's tragedy. The plague doesn't discriminate between rich and poor, educated and ignorant, righteous and sinful. It strikes where it will, and all you can do is bear witness to its passage through the city. Your final appointment of the day is perhaps the most difficult. A house where an entire family has been wiped out except for one small child, a girl of perhaps 5 years old. The neighbors reported that they hadn't seen any adults for several days, but they could hear the child crying inside the house. The house is small and poor, located in one of the worst areas of the city. The watchman stationed outside looks relieved to see you arrive. He's been listening to the child crying for 2 days, but his orders are to let no one in or out of plague houses except for authorized medical personnel. Inside, you find a scene that will haunt your dreams for weeks to come. The bodies of the parents and 2 older children lie in various rooms of the house, all clearly dead from the plague. But in the smallest room, you find the little girl still alive, though weak from hunger and thirst. She's been alone with the dead for at least 2 days, possibly longer. She's too young to understand what's happened to her family, but she knows that something terrible has occurred. She cries constantly, calling for her mother, who lies dead in the next room. You examine the girl carefully, looking for signs of plague infection. Miraculously, she shows no symptoms of the disease. This sometimes happens. A few people seem to be naturally resistant to the plague, or perhaps they're infected but don't develop symptoms. The girl is severely dehydrated and hungry, but otherwise appears healthy. You give her water and some bread from your supplies, and she devours them with the desperate hunger of someone who hasn't eaten in days. But her physical health is only part of the problem. The girl has been traumatized by her experiences, and she's now completely alone in the world. Her parents are dead, her siblings are dead, and she has no other family in London. She's one of thousands of children orphaned by the plague, with no one to care for them and nowhere to go. You arrange for the girl to be taken to one of the orphanages that have been established to care for plague orphans, though you know that these institutions are overcrowded and underfunded. The child's chances of survival are better there than in the plague house, but they're still not good. As you prepare to leave, the girl clings to your leather coat, begging you not to leave her alone. She doesn't understand why everyone she's ever known has disappeared, and she's terrified of being abandoned again. You have to gently pry her fingers loose from your coat, knowing that you're adding to her trauma but having no choice. You leave the house feeling emotionally drained. This is the aspect of your work that weighs most heavily on you. Not the physical danger or the medical challenges, but the human cost of the plague, the way it destroys families and leaves the survivors to cope with losses that are almost too great to bear. The walk back to your lodgings takes you through the heart of London as the sun begins to set. The city looks different in the evening light, the smoke from the fires creating a hazy, reddish glow that makes everything seem unreal, like a vision of hell painted by a medieval artist. The streets are quieter now than they were even a few hours ago. People have learned to stay indoors as much as possible, especially after dark. The night belongs to the death carts and the watchmen, to the sounds of grief and the business of disposing of the dead. You pass several death carts on your way home, their drivers calling out mechanically for people to bring out their dead. The carts are pulled by horses that look as tired and worn as their human drivers, and they're loaded with bodies wrapped in shrouds or simply piled naked on top of each other. The sight of the death carts no longer shocks you as it once did. You've seen so much death over the past months that individual bodies have lost their ability to horrify you. What disturbs you now is the sheer scale of the mortality, the way death has become a routine part of daily life in London. You reach your lodgings as the last light fades from the sky. The building is quiet. Many of the other residents have either died or fled the city. Your footsteps echo in the empty hallway as you climb the stairs to your room. You remove your protective equipment for the second time today, hanging each piece carefully and checking it for damage or wear. The leather is beginning to show signs of the constant use and the harsh conditions it endures. You'll need to have some pieces replaced soon, assuming you can find a leather worker who's still alive and working. Your evening meal is simple. Bread that's grown hard during the day, a piece of salted fish that tastes of brine and preservation, and ale that's gone flat but still carries the bitter comfort of hops. You eat slowly, methodically, your jaw working with the deliberate motion of someone too tired to hurry but too hungry to stop. The bread scrapes against your teeth, dry and coarse from the ash that seems to coat everything in London now. You dip it in the ale to soften it, creating a paste that slides down your throat with little pleasure but necessary sustenance. The fish flakes apart in your fingers, leaving a residue of salt on your skin that you wipe absently on your linen shirt. As you eat, you review the day's work in your mind, a habit that has become as automatic as breathing. 7 houses visited, 11 people examined, 4 confirmed dead, 3 more likely to die within days. The numbers run through your head like a merchant's ledger, each entry representing a life ended or a family destroyed. You think about the little girl you left at the orphanage, wondering if she's stopped crying yet, if she's found some small comfort in the presence of other children who have lost everything. You think about the merchant's wife, probably dead by now, and his son, fighting a battle he's almost certain to lose. The ale grows warm in your mouth, carrying the taste of grain and water that may or may not be clean. Everything in London tastes of smoke and ash now, as if the fires that burn constantly throughout the city have seasoned the very air you breathe. You've grown accustomed to the taste, the way you've grown accustomed to so many things that would have horrified you a year ago. Your hands rest on the rough wooden table, and you notice how they've changed over the months of plague work. The skin is cracked and dry from constant washing with harsh soap and strong spirits. Your fingernails are cut short and scrubbed raw, but you can still see the faint stains that no amount of washing can completely remove. There's a tremor in your fingers now, slight but persistent. It started a few weeks ago and has grown gradually worse. You tell yourself it's from exhaustion, from the strain of working in heavy protective clothing for hours each day, but you know it could be something more serious. The plague affects people in different ways, and some develop tremors and weakness before the more obvious symptoms appear. You flex your fingers, watching the slight shake that accompanies the movement. The tremor is worse when you're tired, better when you're rested, but it's always there now, a constant reminder of the toll this work is taking on your body and mind. The window of your room looks out over the rooftops of London, and you can see the glow of fires throughout the city. Some are the official fires ordered by the authorities to purify the air, but others are the desperate attempts of citizens to burn away the corruption they believe surrounds them. Furniture, clothing, books, anything that might carry the taint of disease goes into the flames. The smoke from these fires creates a permanent haze over the city, a brown-gray cloud that hangs low over the buildings and makes the air thick and difficult to breathe. Your eyes water constantly now, and you've developed a persistent cough that you hope is from the smoke rather than from something more sinister. You finish your meal and push the wooden bowl away from you. The simple act of eating has become a meditation on survival, a recognition that your body needs fuel to continue its grim work, even when hunger has become just another discomfort to endure alongside all the others. The evening light filtering through your window is different now than it was before the plague. The smoke and haze give everything a reddish, hellish cast, as if the very air has been stained with blood. The sun sets earlier than it should, hidden behind the veil of corruption that hangs over the city like a shroud. You stand slowly, feeling the protest in muscles that have been tensed for hours under the weight of leather and the strain of moving carefully through contaminated spaces. Your back aches from the constant forward lean required by your protective clothing, and your shoulders burn from the weight of your equipment bag. You move to the window and look out over the city you've sworn to serve. London stretches out below you, a maze of narrow streets and leaning buildings, most of them marked now with the red crosses that signify the presence of plague. The sight that greets you would have been unimaginable just a year ago. A great city brought low by an enemy too small to see but too powerful to resist. The streets are nearly empty except for the essential workers. The death cart drivers making their endless rounds, the watchmen posted outside infected houses, the occasional plague doctor like yourself moving through the maze of disease and death. The normal life of the city, the merchants and craftsmen, the children playing in the streets, the women hanging washing in their yards, all of that has been suspended, replaced by the grim business of survival. You can hear the sounds of the plague city, the constant tolling of church bells, the creak and rumble of death carts, the occasional cry of grief or pain echoing from behind shuttered windows. These sounds have become the soundtrack of your life, as familiar as the beating of your own heart. But there are other sounds too, softer ones that speak to the persistence of life even in the face of overwhelming death. The lowing of cattle being driven to market, the barking of dogs that somehow continue to find scraps to eat, the cooing of pigeons that nest in the eaves of abandoned buildings. Life continues, even here, even now. You turn away from the window and begin the process of preparing for sleep. Your day clothes need to be washed and aired, your protective equipment needs to be cleaned and inspected, your medical supplies need to be replenished and organized for tomorrow's work. You strip off your linen shirt and breeches, both stained with sweat and marked with the salt deposits that come from working in heavy clothing in the summer heat. The fabric is rough against your skin, made coarse by repeated washing in strong soap and lye. You fold the clothes carefully and set them aside to be washed tomorrow. Your body bears the marks of your profession. Red welts mark where the leather straps of your equipment have rubbed against your skin, and your shoulders are permanently indented from the weight of your protective coat. Your feet are swollen and sore from walking on cobblestones in heavy boots, and your hands are cracked and raw from constant washing. You pour water from a pitcher into a basin and begin the ritual of washing that has become essential to your survival. The water is cold and clean, drawn from a well that you hope hasn't been contaminated by the corruption that seems to seep into everything in the city. You scrub your hands and arms with soap made from lye and ash, working the harsh mixture into your skin until it burns. The soap is supposed to kill any corruption that might cling to your body, but you're not sure how much protection it really provides. Still, you perform the ritual with religious devotion, washing away the day's accumulation of fear and death. Your face requires special attention. The leather mask leaves deep marks around your eyes and jaw, red welts that take hours to fade. You massage these marks gently, working circulation back into the compressed flesh. The skin is tender and sensitive, marked by months of wearing the heavy, uncomfortable protection. You examine your face in the small mirror that hangs on the wall. The reflection that looks back at you is that of a man aged beyond his years. Your hair, once brown and thick, is now streaked with gray and thinning from the stress of constant exposure to danger and death. Your eyes are sunken and shadowed, marked by the permanent squint that comes from peering through foggy glass lenses for hours each day. There are lines around your eyes and mouth that weren't there a year ago, carved by months of witnessing suffering that you're powerless to prevent. Your skin has a grayish cast, whether from the smoke that fills the air or from the toll of chronic exhaustion, you're not sure. You look like what you've become, a creature of death and medicine, someone who walks the boundary between the living and the dead. The transformation is more than physical. You can feel it in the way people react to you, the way they cross themselves when they see you coming, the way children flee from your approach. You turn away from the mirror and continue your evening routine. Your medical supplies need to be checked and replenished. You inventory your bottles of medicine, most of them containing compounds that probably do little good but provide some comfort to the desperate families you serve. There's theriac, the ancient cure all made from dozens of ingredients including viper's flesh and opium. There's Venice treacle, another compound remedy that's supposed to drive out corruption. There are bottles of various herbs and spices, wormwood, angelica, juniper, all believed to have protective properties against the plague. You have instruments too. Lancets for bleeding patients, cupping glasses for drawing out corrupt humors, a small brass syringe for administering medicines. The tools are simple but well made, and you keep them scrupulously clean, though you're not sure how much difference it makes. Your leather bag needs attention as well. The constant exposure to contaminated environments has taken its toll on the material. You clean it carefully with spirits and oil, working the preservatives into the leather to keep it supple and protective. The protective clothing requires the most attention. Each piece must be inspected for damage, cleaned with spirits and harsh soap, then treated with oils and waxes to maintain its protective properties. The process is tedious and time-consuming, but your life depends on the integrity of your equipment. You work by candlelight, the flame casting dancing shadows on the walls of your small room. The candle is made from tallow rather than wax, filling the air with the smell of rendered fat and smoky flame. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar, another element of the reduced circumstances that have become normal during the plague years. As you work, you can hear the sounds of the city settling into its uneasy rest. The death carts have finished their rounds for the day, and the watchmen have taken their positions outside the marked houses. The sounds of grief and pain continue, but they're muffled now by closed shutters and the exhaustion that comes with prolonged suffering. You think about tomorrow's appointments, the families you'll visit, the suffering you'll witness. The routine has become as predictable as the rising and setting of the sun. Houses marked with red crosses, families destroyed by disease, your own helplessness in the face of death's advance through the city. But there's something else too, something that keeps you going despite the horror and the futility. It's the knowledge that you're one of the few people willing to enter the houses of the infected, to provide what comfort you can to the dying and their families. Your presence may not save lives, but it means that people don't die completely alone, completely abandoned. You finish cleaning your equipment and preparing for the next day. Your movements are slow and deliberate, conserving energy for the work ahead. Everything you do now is calculated to preserve your strength and maintain your ability to function in conditions that would have been unimaginable before the plague. You prepare your sleeping area, spreading a thin mattress on the floor near the window. The bed that came with the room has been removed, burned with the possessions of the previous tenant who died of the plague. You've grown accustomed to sleeping on the floor, and the hard surface actually helps with the back pain that comes from wearing heavy equipment all day. You cover the mattress with a sheet that's been boiled in lye and dried in the sun. Everything in your room has been treated to remove any possible contamination, creating an environment that's as sterile as you can make it. The precautions may be useless, but they provide some psychological comfort in a world where death seems to lurk around every corner. You blow out the candle and lie down on your makeshift bed. The darkness is welcome after a day spent peering through the foggy lenses of your mask. Your eyes, strained from the constant effort of seeing clearly through the protective equipment, begin to relax for the first time since dawn. The sounds of the city continue through the night, but they're different now. The active sounds of death and disease give way to the passive sounds of a city trying to rest. You can hear the wind moving through empty buildings, carrying with it the smells of smoke and corruption that have become the perfume of London. Your body begins to relax, muscle by muscle releasing the tension that's been building throughout the day. Your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, your hands stop their constant trembling. But sleep doesn't come easily, it never does anymore. Your mind continues to race, replaying the day's encounters, anticipating tomorrow's challenges. You think about the families you've left behind, wondering who will be alive when you return to check on them. The plague's progression is unpredictable. Sometimes it kills within hours, sometimes it lingers for days. Occasionally, miraculous recoveries occur, but they're rare enough to be spoken of in whispers, as if acknowledging them might somehow curse the survivors. You think about your own mortality, something that's impossible to avoid when you spend your days surrounded by death. The plague doesn't discriminate between doctor and patient, between those who serve and those who are served. Several of your colleagues have already succumbed to the disease, their protective equipment and medical knowledge providing no immunity against the invisible enemy. You wonder if you'll wake up tomorrow with the telltale fever, if you'll discover the swellings that mark the plague's arrival in your own body. The thought doesn't terrify you as much as it once did. You've seen too much death to fear it with the same intensity you once did. But it saddens you to think of the work left undone, the families who will have no one to care for them if you fall. The tremor in your hands is more noticeable when you're lying still, a fine shake that runs through your fingers and up your arms. You tell yourself it's exhaustion, but you know it could be something more serious. The plague manifests differently in different people, and some develop neurological symptoms before the more obvious signs appear. You close your eyes and try to empty your mind, to find some peace in the darkness. But images from the day intrude. The face of the dead woman in Cheapside, the terrified eyes of the orphaned children, the desperate pleading of the merchant who couldn't accept that his money was useless against the plague. These images will join the collection of memories that haunt your sleep, a gallery of suffering that grows larger each day. You've learned to live with these memories, to file them away in some corner of your mind where they can't interfere with your ability to function. But they're always there, waiting to surface in moments of quiet reflection. You shift position on your hard mattress, trying to find a comfortable arrangement for your aching body. The floor is unforgiving, but it's also clean, free from the corruption that might linger in regular bedding. You've learned to sleep anywhere, in any position, to snatch rest whenever it's available. The wind picks up outside, rattling the shutters and carrying with it the smells of the city, smoke, ash, corruption, and underneath it all, the green smell of the Thames and the countryside beyond. London is surrounded by clean air and open spaces, but they might as well be on the moon for all the good they do the trapped inhabitants of the plague city. You think about the people who have fled, the wealthy merchants and noble families who abandoned London at the first sign of trouble. You don't blame them. If you had the means to leave, you might have done the same. But you also feel a kind of pride in staying, in continuing to serve the city even when service has become synonymous with walking among the dead. Your breathing begins to slow and deepen as your body finally begins to surrender to exhaustion. The day's work has drained you physically and emotionally, leaving you with barely enough energy to maintain consciousness. Sleep, when it comes, will be deep and dreamless, the sleep of someone who has pushed beyond normal human endurance. But before sleep claims you completely, you perform one final ritual. You recite the names of the patients you've seen today, a prayer of sorts for the living and the dead. Thomas Whitmore's wife, already at peace. Marcus Devlin's family, gone to whatever comes after. The little girl in Whitechapel, hopefully safe in the orphanage. The merchant's wife and son, fighting their losing battle against the plague. The names run through your mind like a litany, each one representing a life touched by your presence, however briefly. You may not be able to save them, but you can remember them, can honor their struggle against the invisible enemy that stalks through London's streets. The city grows quieter as the night deepens, but it never falls completely silent. The sounds of suffering continue, muffled by distance and darkness but never completely absent. London has become a city of mourning, a place where grief is as common as breathing and death as familiar as sunrise. You pull the thin blanket up to your chin, feeling the rough wool against your skin. The blanket has been washed so many times that it's more holes than fabric, but it provides some psychological comfort if not much physical warmth. Comfort has become relative. Anything that doesn't actively cause pain or fear is a luxury. Your mind begins to drift, the sharp edges of consciousness softening as sleep approaches. The images of the day fade into the background, replaced by the gentle darkness that offers temporary escape from the horror of waking life. This transition between consciousness and sleep is the most peaceful part of your day, the only time when you're truly free from the weight of responsibility and death. You think about your life before the plague, when you were a regular physician treating regular ailments, broken bones, difficult births, the seasonal fevers that came and went without destroying entire families. That life seems like a dream now, so different from your current existence that it might have belonged to someone else entirely. The person you were before the plague would be horrified by what you've become, by the things you've seen and done in the name of medicine. But that person also couldn't have imagined the circumstances that would require such transformation, couldn't have conceived of a disease so virulent and merciless that it would turn London into a charnel house. You've adapted because adaptation was the only alternative to abandoning your calling entirely. You've learned to function in circumstances that would have broken your former self, to find meaning in work that often seems futile. The adaptation hasn't been without cost. You can feel the damage it's done to your soul, the way it's hardened you against suffering that should never become routine. But there's also a strange kind of satisfaction in knowing that you've endured, that you've continued to serve even when service required walking through hell. You've become something you never intended to be, a specialist in death, a guide for the dying, a witness to humanity's darkest hour. The sounds of London continue to filter through your window. The distant tolling of bells, the creak of wind through empty buildings, the occasional cry of pain or grief from the marked houses. These sounds have become the lullaby of your existence, the soundtrack to your uneasy rest. You think about tomorrow, about the appointments waiting for you, the families hoping for miracles that you can't provide. The routine will repeat itself, the heavy protective clothing, the careful examination of infected patients, the futile administration of medicines that probably do more harm than good. But you'll continue because someone must, because the alternative is to abandon the sick to die completely alone. Your presence may not change the outcome, but it changes the experience, provides some small comfort to people facing the ultimate terror. Your breathing deepens further as sleep finally begins to claim you. The day's tensions ease their grip on your body, allowing your muscles to relax completely for the first time since dawn. The tremor in your hands subsides, and the ache in your back fades to a dull background sensation. The transition into sleep is gradual, like sinking into warm water. Your conscious mind releases its grip on the day's worries and fears, allowing them to drift away into the darkness. For a few precious hours, you'll be free from the weight of responsibility, free from the knowledge of what tomorrow will bring. But even in sleep, the images remain. The faces of the dead, the eyes of the dying, the desperate pleading of families facing extinction. These memories have become part of you, woven into the fabric of your being so thoroughly that they follow you even into dreams. The plague has changed you in ways that will never be undone. You've seen too much, endured too much, witnessed too much suffering to ever return to the person you were before. The transformation is as complete as it is irreversible, marking you as surely as if you carried the plague's physical scars. But there's also a kind of peace in acceptance, in acknowledging what you've become and finding meaning in it. You're no longer the healer you once imagined yourself to be, but you've become something else. A companion to the dying, a witness to their suffering, a reminder that someone cares enough to stay. The wind outside grows stronger, rattling the shutters and carrying with it the promise of another day like this one. Tomorrow will bring new cases, new families destroyed by disease, new opportunities to provide what small comfort you can in the face of overwhelming tragedy. But for now, there's only the darkness and the gradual surrender to exhaustion. Your body finally releases its grip on consciousness, allowing you to sink into the deep, dreamless sleep that's become your only refuge from the waking nightmare of plague-stricken London. The city continues its struggle through the night, the sounds of suffering and death providing a constant counterpoint to the silence of sleep. But in your small room above the apothecary's shop, there's finally peace, the temporary peace that comes when consciousness finally surrenders to the blessed oblivion of exhausted sleep. Your last conscious thought is of the patients waiting for tomorrow's visit, the families hoping against hope for healing that you probably can't provide. But you'll try anyway, because trying is all that's left, all that separates you from the despair that threatens to consume everyone who remains in the plague city. The candle has long since burned out, leaving the room in complete darkness. The silence is broken only by the sound of your deep, even breathing and the distant sounds of a city struggling to survive the night. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new tragedies, new opportunities to serve in the face of overwhelming odds. But tonight, there's only rest, the deep, healing rest that allows you to continue your impossible work. In the morning, you'll wake to the sound of church bells tolling for the dead, and the cycle will begin again. For now, though, there's only the darkness and the gentle rhythm of breath, the basic functions of life continuing despite everything that threatens to extinguish them. London sleeps uneasily around you, a city of the sick and the dying trying to find what rest they can. And in your small room, you join them in that uneasy sleep, your body finally surrendering to the exhaustion that's been building all day. The plague doctor's work is never done, but even plague doctors must rest, must find some small refuge from the endless battle against death itself. The night stretches ahead, offering temporary respite from the horror of the waking world. In a few hours, the bells will ring again, the death carts will resume their rounds, and you'll don your leather armor once more to walk among the dying. But for now, there's only silence, only the deep peace of exhausted sleep, only the temporary escape from a world gone mad with disease and death.